This is our COVID Roundup and CDC update for July 12th, 2024. Since last week, there have been no changes in deaths due to COVID. So we had 2 weeks of sharp increases, followed by a week of sharp decreases, followed by a week of being constant. Of note, while they still haven't updated the auto default here, if you click on the drop down menu, you can set it to 7.6, which will give you last week's data. When I do that, one of the new variants that jump out to me is KP4.1. There isn't a ton of information out on this variant yet. However, last week, Alexander Tin reported this CDC map here, and when we recreate it by selecting the variant down here, we see an approximate national prevalence of less than 2%, with a high concentration in Texas, where it is 17.9% of all variants there, meaning that KP4.1 might be the next variant to watch out for. And we also know that KP4.1 is a JN1.11.1 subvariant, and that it has this convergent mutation, which puts it a part of the FLIRT grouping. Next, moving on to Raj's COVID variant tracker. Raj is still noting KP3.1.1 is one to watch, and when we do a last week to this week comparison, simplifying what Raj showed, we see that KP1.1.1 dropped out of rotation, and when we group the major variants of KP2, KP3, and LB1, we see that there are decreases in KP2, increases in KP3, and increases in LB1, where a newer variant LP1 just made it onto the board. And so far, I haven't been able to find out too much about that yet, so I'll keep monitoring it for next week. Moving on to wastewater, when we look at New York State, as a reminder, anything that is dark blue is low levels of COVID in the wastewater, anything that is light blue is moderate levels, and anything from yellow to bright red is high levels of COVID in the wastewater. As of this past week, 79% of reporting COVID wastewater facilities are reporting at the highest levels, where there's a clear trend of increasing wastewater levels, which makes this a pretty dramatic increase in COVID wastewater levels over the past 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, 56% were reporting at the highest levels. Last week, this increased to 68%, and then this past week, it increased again to 79%, signaling quite the jump in COVID wastewater levels. Moving on to California and wastewater scan. Before I dive in, it's important to note that as of July 10th, 30 facilities stopped reporting to wastewater scan. At this time, all we know is that data is no longer collected from those sites, all listed here, which is 42 in total, but for California, there's 30. Yet, despite this massive drop-off in data, we are still seeing increasing levels of COVID in the wastewater, which can be more easily viewed here. And to emphasize, instead of 59 reporting facilities in California, there are now only 29. Similarly, for all US reporting wastewater facilities in wastewater scan, there are no longer 194 reporting facilities. Approximately 42 have been lost, meaning there's only 152 now. This represents about a 22% decrease in wastewater facilities. And yet, despite this, we're seeing increasing levels of COVID in the wastewater, where it is still very clearly increasing, marking this as our highest COVID summer wave to date within the entirety of the pandemic.